It's incredibly reassuring and empowering, actually, to, not to realize that's not just us. We don't have to kind of wait for years and then sneak off to see a therapist when things aren't going well. It actually is a really wonderful, helpful, practical, enjoyable, fun thing to do some of this learning together. We don't need to be in trouble. It will just in our relationship to get a lot of benefit from doing these things.
So, hi Maggie.
Hi, Tim.
Yeah, really good to be meeting with you. I was thinking about our meeting and I was thinking of why I wanted to talk to you about this and kind of help find a way that more people find their way to you. Firstly, because I really value you as a colleague in this mindfulness teaching work we do, and also as a therapist. And also I'm deeply interested in how we translate some of that stuff, our mindfulness compassion work, into our relationships, especially a couple relationship. I know you're doing this work and I really wanted more people to find it and maybe find a context in which they can, with great tenderness and care, work through some of this stuff so they can be more free and loving in their relationship. So that's what I came up with when I was thinking about meeting with you. I've done a lot of therapy and I've done couples therapy, and couples therapy was the most excruciating, really it can be a tough thing, right? So I'd love to hear something about the how it runs and the kind of that would caretake that kind of anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, probably the biggest thing that people want to know is no, you do not have to share. In fact, I don't allow or encourage people to share that really private relational stuff in the group space. That just doesn't work well. And the research shows that we are comparing creatures. It's part of our threat bias. So it's just not helpful. But what is incredibly helpful is still being in that group, which carries that message that, unlike therapy, this is a challenge for everyone. Relationships are really hard for every single person. And it does relate back to, which is why it's at the heart of our mindfulness endeavor. It relates back to the way that we're wired on the one hand for love and belonging and connection. That's the good news. And then the tricky news is that we're also have that wiring for threat and danger and survival, and we don't need fixing. We're all the same. We all have the same challenge of the
Yeah.
tricky nervous system.
What sort of things happen in the group? What sort of explorations happen? How do people spend that time on this retreat setting with other couples and
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. It's very much like what you might imagine or have experienced in a typical mindfulness retreat or yoga retreat or MBSR course. So there'll be, often starting with practice, and on this particular retreat, there'll be an optional hour of mindfulness and yoga in the mornings, but then the workshop session, which will be 3 or 4 hours, so quite a big one, will usually
Mhm.
be in the mornings while we're fresh in a beautiful setting. And it's really around showing a lot of that theory and bits and pieces and funny YouTube clips and new understandings actually that have come out of just the way we now understand adult attachment. We've always had a pretty good, or since Bowlby, we've had a pretty good understanding of infant
Mm.
parent attachment, but not so much adult to adult attachment and how that keeps playing out. A lot of stuff around fighting well and navigating conflict and repairs and regulation, and but then each of those little theory parts, uh, you'll then pair up with your partner in a remote space in the room and have
Uh-huh.
your own private conversation. They'll be very structured, so a bit similar to MBSR. So you
Yeah.
usually will be given a question or a particular conversation. The course really draws heavily from Sue Johnson's emotionally focused therapy for couples. Bit of
Uh-huh.
a mouthful, but that's
Mm.
the most evidence-based model going around,
Okay, brilliant.
closely followed up by the Gottman stuff, which is the
Yeah.
best research going around. And this course really combines those, but also the beautiful work of Stan Tatkin, who's really honed in on the regulation part of it, fight, flight, freeze, and how that does take us into those four horsemen of the apocalypse, John Gottman calls them. We generally just tend to gravitate towards what's not going well
Mm,
and the things that might have upset us that our partner said or did or not said or did, and go into those stories about what that means, and
yeah.
ruminate about that, and do all of those things that we learn about in the mindfulness trainings, but they have a particular color and flavor often that's quite predictable in
Yeah.
the realm of close relationships. So part of the challenge is, how do we actually start waking up that taking in the good in
Yeah.
our relationships, enjoying the good,
Mm,
navigating sometimes those tricky areas, especially around things like sex,
mm,
um, that can often have taken us into sort of just long periods of not necessarily being able to communicate about.
yeah. Of isolation. Yeah.
Yeah. We do that hard work on retreat in the mornings, and then
Hmm.
your afternoon is free to
Yeah.
either come along on the group excursions or explore the town or just relax around the pool
Yeah.
or do your own yoga or practice or whatever you want to
Mm,
do. And then, a little bit of happy hour and again, shared meal or go
mm,
out for your hot date with your partner,
yeah.
whatever you'd prefer. So there's lots of
Mm.
choices and options.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is there's lots of space. There's lots of practice to ground ourselves in knowing your insides and what you're perceiving. And there's also lots of privacy for couples to actually, in this retreat setting with other couples, but most of the work, except the socializing and but most of the work is really happening in a very contained, structured way for them to speak to each other and hear each other in new ways. And that is very relieving. And new patterns can be found of meeting conflict.
Absolutely. And they're the patterns, they're the new experiences
Yeah.
that create closer, safer connection with our
Yeah.
partners and healing if there's been those spots.
Yeah, and whether that story is about I'm unworthy, unlovable, etc., or whether it's about he's this, she's that, it's both the same trap, isn't it? It's kind of wow, we're just stuck in that shaping of it and not opening to where it might actually be digested. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the thing about this training, which I've really tried to stay true to the things that I know are so powerful in the
Mhm.
mindfulness trainings,
Yeah.
is really around knowing that they can't be learnt through theory or
Yeah.
insight alone. That's always good, and I've got
Yeah.
all of that in there. I think it is helpful,
Mm.
but it's learnt through experience and practice. And
Yeah.
the research shows that we actually need to experience this good stuff, or
Yeah.
even the really hard stuff, but working through that
Yeah.
successfully, to make those changes that we need to have, to bring a good relationship into being more of a great relationship.
Yeah.